Welcome to Continuing the Conversation, where we bring you authentic AI insights. Last episode, we talked about why most people struggle to take advantage of AI agents, because you can't delegate what you can't describe. We called it the articulation gap. You can do your work, but can you explain it in a way that's transferable? And I ended the episode with a question. Why didn't anyone teach us this skill in the first place? So let me ask you something. Could you actually explain how you do your job step by step in a way that someone else can follow? Most people can't, but that's not your fault. It's how we were trained. Because the uncomfortable truth is school was not designed to teach you how to think. It was designed to teach you what to produce. And to be fair, it worked. It worked for the world we were preparing for. But that world has changed. I'm Chelene Martin, AI strategist, business operator, and someone who spends a lot of time helping people actually use AI in their real lives and work. Joining me is Rob, the CEO of CharmIQ, a longtime advocate for getting smarter about how we collaborate with AI. Rob, welcome back.
Hello.
Let's start with the big question. So Rob, you've said school was designed for outputs, not for processes. Let's break that down for people, because I think this is where a lot of us realize we were never trained to think this way.
Wow. These questions are always fantastic. It really digs down into the heart of the matter. I usually love to use an example of my partner. During COVID, we were putting together these puzzles, and the hidden room kind of ones, where you have to put a bunch of different pieces together and then they form a thing, and then that gives you another clue and that forms another thing and everything else. And she would get to the point where she's just like, yeah, no, I don't have the answer. Well, that's interesting. Let's try to find the answer, because there must be an answer. She's like, yeah, no, I'm out of options. I don't have anything. And I was like, that's fascinating to me, because fundamentally who I am and how I've developed and everything else is all about finding these tough situations and like digging around and trying to find the answer. And it's clear that we are not taught how to do that. Like, there's some of us who just kind of stumbled upon different techniques, and I absolutely was not taught to do it. Most of school is all about memorize this, perform this task, let's see if you get it done, and so forth. And I'll just say, since the Industrial Revolution, that served us pretty darn well. That's what we do. We go in there, we perform, somebody gives us some instructions, we go do it, and life is good. But that's definitely not the process where we're headed towards. Thinking about, like, can you imagine a class where instead of giving you an essay, they were like, well, come up with 4 different essay topics that you could do, and let's just figure out which one of the topics is the best one for you to work on. And it's normally you're given a topic and you just simply have to execute. You're not given the process of having to go through it. And going back a couple episodes, this really hit me hard. When I was at the debate a couple of weeks ago, It was really fascinating because the kids had to argue both sides. Originally, they had started out a few weeks before it where they had to argue the pro side, and then the industry people that came in actually were better articulate at the pro side. So the kids had to switch to the con side. And it's really fascinating because you're not taught that there's a right side and a wrong side. There's a way to argue for something and there's a way to argue against something. And how many kids do you know actually join debate club? And if you look at the popular literature, those are normally the dorky kids. So it just so happens that the dorky kids are going to win out on this one, unfortunately. So yeah, school does not prepare us for all of this.
Yeah. And I started thinking about my days at Yahoo, and, we were rewarded for outcomes. Yeah. We were rewarded for revenue, deals, execution, growing partnerships, business development. Nobody ever asked us to document how we got there, like in a way that someone else could replicate, right? And I now know with AI that there's that missing layer, and that's actually the whole game, right? So if we've been optimizing for outputs, whether it's in elementary school, high school, college, where does that actually show up in real life today?
Wow, that's a big one. Unless you go into graduate school, like, you are not forced to come up with a hypothesis and defend it and so forth. Sure, maybe a little bit when you're in high school, science class and whatnot, but you are not really for outcomes are what you're looking for, right? Like, get this test done, get this lab done, get this stuff done. We don't really talk about the how or like figure out what the outcome should be and then follow them. And then even more so, and it's fascinating, like, as you said it aloud, how many times have I been in organizations where the sales team just simply talked about what their successes were, not like the process by which they got those successes so we can learn from them. And really the only time you would learn those is if you got into a mentorship, if you, did a ride along, for example, with one of those people and saw it. You would never, once you're deemed good enough and you're sent off, you're expected to just be on your own and do everything on your own in the world and figure it out. And it's almost derided to ask somebody for help as if you don't know. And to which I would say, but that's how you learn. So why would it be bad for you to ask? So yeah, it really hit me hard a moment ago when you said that. The only time that you're typically forced to kind of think through your process and to prepare for it is if you teach. You learn a lot really fast when you're a teacher, especially, and I spent most of my college days being a TA and a tutor for people. And then I was actually going to be a high school science teacher. The scream of, the economy and everything at the time, the internet was going big and everything. I went that way. But I spent so much time learning how to teach and learning how to learn because I was teaching all of that stuff. If in the workplace, unless you're training somebody or unless you're building training material, you do not think through the process. Even as developers, when I work with our developer, he's always struggling to articulate how did a process come to be? How did he go through those steps? How did he get there and so forth? And now we're really learning it with these AI agents, which is, you just can't say, do my job for me, because it doesn't know what that is. You have to describe step by step what you're doing and how you're going through. So yeah, just every time I think about this, it's mind blowing. All of the things that we have been trained to do forever, since the Industrial Revolution, since schooling became the thing that happened, we were trained one particular way. And all of a sudden, the next thing that we need to do is the thing that we're not taught to do. So what a crazy time.
It is. And this is exactly why people say AI doesn't really work for me, or it doesn't sound like me. And it's not the tool. It's that they've never been taught to break down what they do or how they do it into something that AI can actually follow, right? And so that for me is I even look back at it on my training days when I was teaching people how to sell digital advertising, right? We were tasked with going into all of the newspapers across the country and train these salespeople how to sell digital advertising. And it was that very moment that I had to take a step back, build the curriculum, train the trainers, and bring it to those salespeople. And look, some of those salespeople were the top sellers in print, millions of dollars, right? And we were coming in with this silly media advertising. And, they're like, you can't teach me how to sell. I've been the top sales performer for, 15 years. So it's not until we had to really step back and look at the differences in the process so we could train them how to do it. And so that brings me to another question I think is really important. Why is this suddenly a problem now? And what changed so fast that this gap actually matters?
Great question. Really awesome question. We talked many episodes ago about the rising tide lifts all boats, right? Yes. The lower end of the bar became literally what the LLMs can do. You are unhireable if the LLM can do your task better. It is fascinating for that to be true. And of course, this has always been true with time as we automated things on assembly lines and so forth. Once it was cheaper and more efficient and maybe safer, however you want to look at it, for machines to do it, the machines did it. We always thought it was never going to come for the knowledge workers, though I will, of course, bring up the human calculator thing. Unfortunately, during the war, it went to a lot of women to do it. And normally the plight of the woman is typically ignored in a lot of these cases. So there were thousands and thousands of women computers who did a lot of the work during World War II. And they immediately lost all of their jobs right after World War II. Well, not only was there not a need anymore, but more specifically, the digital computers were made. And so I guarantee you, if you would have asked every one of those, that they would have never expected that their job would just evaporate in a moment. And I think through that really underrepresented and unless you've read some of the few books that are out there, actually some fantastic books. I don't remember right off the top of my head, but I have definitely read a couple of really fantastic books about especially the women calculators during World War II. And the impacts that they had. If we got that side of the story, what did it feel like to just basically go from top of your profession, A1, to basically completely obviated in a snap? And that's happening right now where we are. To go into some of the interesting stuff, I was as usual. We tend to film this on the same day that I talk to a marketing friend of mine. And he is, he's working with CharmIQ, and he is building out the marketing material for basically a banking style platform. And he had never had the compliance part of his experience before. And it's been invaluable for him to have now a cadre of charms that help him understand, just so that, and basically just to get to the punchline, every time before working with Charm, he would take all of his copy to compliance, and they would spend hours going through every single thing and explaining it to him and like why this doesn't go and everything else. And now, because he can pass it through basically his compliance agents before he goes in, he basically gets one or two questions. They tend to be more, questioning like an approach rather than like the compliance and so forth. And, that is impossible before now. We have teams of people whose job it was. And I'm not saying this will get rid of compliance or anything else. I'm saying what my hopeful message that you'll read from this is that it's just moving up the ladder. So instead of compliance taking 95% of their time, just getting rid of some of the rote stuff at the bottom, they end up being focused at the really important decisions at the top. And I think that the message that I'm trying to give across this whole discussion here is that this rising tide is lifting all boats. And by doing it, it's basically covering all of these skills that only existed because we tend to not have cross-functional skills. Right now, you can talk to a developer agent to know probably 95% of everything that I've learned over the past 30 to 40 years. But at the end of the day, where my skill lands is to know which one of those things that you should do through the practical experience and so forth. So again, what's been really fascinating about this is all of these simple skills that we have, some of these cross-functional skills that we have, some of these more generic skills that we have are going to slowly get chipped away. We have to really figure out where our value exists in that process, which means you need to understand all of the steps. So take the process of taking marketing copy and publishing it. Like, what has to happen there? It has to go through legal and compliance and like all of these steps. So had he not figured out that workflow process, like he would not know that he can bring in agents and help him at different steps that actually end up facilitating the process and allowing them as an organization to actually do and run more tests to actually give a better work product to their end users. So really interesting how this has happened. And so that gets back to like, why does this matter now? Well, the reason why this matters now is, again, the tide is slowly ratcheting itself up to the point where you can go online and download Claude skills for basically a whole bunch of different areas within your organization. And if you're not using those, like, you're really going to get left behind, and you have to understand where. So do only the compliance people use the compliance agents? And the answer, hopefully through what I just said, is no. Like, you have to know in your process that compliance is part of it, and you should use that compliance agent to help you get through that process and get allow the human to give you the value at a much sooner in the process, and have more time spent on the value part of it and so forth. So hopefully that gives you paints a picture of this whole thing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And this is where it gets a little uncomfortable, right? Because people think AI is making things easier, and it is, but it's also exposing where we don't actually understand our own thinking until we really get through it. Right. And I want to say something here because this is the part that matters. I think there's a lot of conversation right now about AI killing critical thinking or AI taking jobs. Right. And I actually don't think that's what's happening. I think that AI is exposing something we were never really taught in the first place. We were taught on how to get to the answer, not how to explain how we got there. And now AI can generate the answer instantly, but what's missing becomes really obvious. So it isn't about AI making us worse thinkers. It's about revealing where we never fully learned how to think in the first place, right? And I think that is so poignant. And if you take a minute to think about it, I know I did in my own, like, as I told you, I think back on my Yahoo days and working with lawyers. And the thing I hated most about my job was redlining contracts. And sometimes contracts were easy, cut and dried, and there were templates. And sometimes contracts were very strategic because these deals had never been done. And I would spend hours going through different versions. And I think if I only had CharmIQ to help me like sit down and go through it and have charms that were experts, I could go to my lawyers and not waste their time. right?
Yeah.
Say, I've run this through my legalese,
Yeah.
charms, and I know the lawyers that I work with would be still have something to say about my red lines, but it would not be a 2-hour conversation. It would be a 15-minute conversation. And then we could have 30 minutes to like up our game
Yeah,
together.
brainstorm and everything else. Like, isn't that amazing about this thing? Is
Yes.
it? And if the value you provide tends to be in this initial phase, you're going to have to figure out where the real value lies, because we're going to chew through those initial phases. Like the red line phase is just like simply because you didn't have the knowledge that existed in somebody else's domain. And that's totally fine. That always happens in cross domain. But now we have these things that have the cross domain knowledge and really help there. And now we can start to get to the value add of where we really use our critical thinking skills, our ability to synthesize across all these things, past experiences, et cetera. Those really come to the forefront.
And I do want to keep going back a little bit to like, so if execution isn't the skill anymore, like get the A's, turn in the paper, go to college. If execution isn't the skill anymore, what is the skill?
Yeah. So going back to what I said at the beginning, imagine you sitting there with a bunch of puzzles that are hard and you don't know what to do. That's the new skill, which is how do you figure out how to break down the process of solving a problem? How do you do that? What are the steps that you can do? And it was super interesting with my partner because she's just like, I don't have another step. I am out of steps. Yeah. And so, we went through and we talked about like, what are the different ways that you can look for it? And sometimes you take the set of things that and like look for the place where there's a hole and like, it's probably in there. And at least you know where it is rather than where it isn't. So being able to break tasks down into steps, looking for decision points. Where do you need input? Where do you need information from other things? Obviously, trying to explain why a set of decisions was made the way that it is. And as you get further and further along in your career, you rely a lot on your past experience. And sometimes it's really hard to articulate why it is. And it's like, well, because in this one situation, I got bit in the butt the one time. I always go back to the old story that I tell around Thanksgiving about the mother who's showing her daughter like how to make turkey, and they would always cut off the legs and they would tie them and put them at the bottom and so forth. And the daughter would ask like, why are you doing it that way? And the mom's like, well, that's just the way my mom did it. And then they went back up to mom and grandma, and basically, long story short, grandma's like, well, I had a pan, it was too small, so it was the only way we can make it fit, so we had to cut it off. So like actually knowing the reasons why things happen is just so darn important, and not just that it worked, but like what were the conditions, and having all of that knowledge and being able to articulate it to the future generations in a way that allows them to work. Like these are the new skills that are high and mighty.
Yeah. And more in demand. And this is the shift that I'm seeing with clients, right? The ones getting real value from AI aren't the ones like with the best prompts. They're the ones who can think in systems. They know what they're trying to do before they open the tool, right? They know what the end result is and how to get there.
It's fascinating you say that, because every time that I talk to somebody who is like just killing it within CharmIQ, and they're like, I have to go in knowing where I want to go with this. I can't just go in, or if they do go in without an idea, they spend a whole amount of time trying to figure out where they want to go. And that's so different from when I see the, folks use like ChatGPT and like other more casual approaches. They're just asking, like, do this rather than let's go build something. Let's sculpt something together. There's perform this task. No, that's not it. Do this again. No, that's not it. Like such a night and day difference.
It is. It is. And I know you spoke about debate a little bit ago. And I love that because it's not about arguing, right? It's about pressure testing your thinking.
Yeah,
and
that's a great statement. Pressure testing.
They don't
just
do that
because you have the idea doesn't mean it'll withstand something. So it's less about the good idea. It's about the good idea that like actually sticks.
Right. And I see that with AI, they'll put in what they want to do and then they'll take the first answer, copy and paste and move on. And if you just spend a little time, even if you love the answer, even if you think what AI gave you was, oh my gosh, that's so amazing. It's so great to just dig a little deeper with the agent or with the charm and ask questions or, maybe be on the other side and go against it. Or how did you get there? And I always tell people, do a little bit deeper digging and you'll be surprised at the output, right?
Yeah. And so my statement to everyone is always, have different dudes, different models, different prompts, generate a couple of different things, and then don't have a decision or whatever. Just have them debate it. Like have the one who turned one thing say why theirs is better than another one or why another one might be better. You're just a coach. You're just a mentor. You're just a facilitator in some of these discussions. Obviously, there's the point where you make the decision and you choose which one you want to go with. But there is so much about the debate that is really exciting. And I would just say what I always say, which is be curious. Like this may be a great answer, but like, are there other answers? Like, what would somebody in a different space say about this? How would they think about it? Because sometimes you end up with an echo chamber, especially with all kinds of the sycophancy that happens around some of these agents. There's like, that's a great idea, Rob. Like, let's do that. And it's like, no, I don't want it to be a great idea. I want you to come up with an idea as to how to make it a better idea.
Yes. So this always gets me thinking, and I think on my business and my strategy side, and then I think on my parents' side, right? Because kids are using AI and it's in education and, you know, some schools ban it, but we still use it. So for parents watching this, actually, what do you think we should be telling our kids to focus on now? Because I know they're not teaching this in school. Because if AI can write essays and solve problems and generate code and give the answers, then what's left? What's the skill we should be focusing on?
Yeah, we've got to turn on a dime here. This is a really interesting time to be alive. So what should you be asking your kid? Well, if they turned out an essay, it's almost who cares? Like, talk me through it. Like, what parts of it really resonated with you? Like, why do they resonate with you? What are the parts that don't resonate with you? Of these sets of things that you talked about, why did you choose this as the topic rather than that? And because that's all you're doing now is hopefully you just heard through our discussion is you end up with so many results that get turned out by AI and you have to figure out like which one's good and why is it good? And is it good for a particular audience and not for another? What are you trying to say? Like, what is the core message here? There's so many times that I'll have an idea and then the LLM will come back with something beautiful, but in a different area. And I'm just like, like, it's so beautiful and you want to go with it, but it's like, well, but that's not really what I wanted to say. That's not really the point. So, you know, articulate what it is that you want to be able to say, be able to defend your position for and against. Again, never take these things personally. Debate is a great exercise. Take the side of an argument that bothers you the most. So if you're a Republican, then take the Democratic viewpoint. And if you're like, go the other way, right? Go Democrat, Republic, go the opposite side. And sometimes you'll find value in the blending of these two ideas and how they come together and actually form an idea, which is how the founding fathers of our country wanted this to go. That's why we have three, the three pillars, et cetera, et cetera. It's like, you need that debate in order to make this stuff happen. So figure out, ask the kid, like, if there's an essay or something that they wrote, like, why is it valuable to come up with this essay? So not only did you have the essay, what are the value of this thing come out of it? So all those things, really ask the second level questions. And don't forget that you also can get help on these things from your friendly LLM.
Yes.
Pass it your child's thing. And like, what questions can I ask my son or daughter about this thing to probe? Like that you get help there too.
Yeah. And they'll give you ideas. So this, for me, this really reframes everything about education. I think of that often. And the problem isn't that the schools are broken or they're not teaching our kids what they should do. It's like school was designed for a world where execution was the skill. And now execution is cheap. But for everyone, whether you're a parent, a CEO, salesperson, an individual contributor, it's like using these tools, knowing you. It's what I always go back to. These tools can make you better, stronger, faster versions of yourself. It would help me save 2 hours of my day doing Redlines so I could focus on actually closing the deal and not arguing with the lawyers about the Redlines. So for everyone watching, the challenge isn't to learn a new AI tool this week. The challenge is to ask yourself, can I actually explain what I do well enough to teach it? And if not, that's not a weakness. That's your next edge. And for parents listening, the conversation isn't how do you get good grades? It's how do you design a system that produces the work, or what went into producing that awesome essay that you wrote, or how did you get to the answer of that math problem? So hopefully in next week or weeks to come, we can take it a step further. We could talk about whether AI is actually killing critical thinking or exposing that we never really learned it in the first place, right? So everyone, thanks for joining us. Links to CharmIQ and previous episodes are below. And as always, please like, comment, and follow. We love hearing from you and growing this conversation. Thanks for being here. And Rob, As always, this was a good one.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.